Good evening. Let us begin with an observation so ordinary that it almost disappears from view. We are never still. From the molecular choreography that sustains a cell, to the electrical migrations of thought across the mind, to the slow arc of a life from emergence to cessation, we are always already in motion. What we call a self is not a static object occupying a fixed position in the world. It is a process, a trajectory, a temporary coherence moving through time. We are not nouns masquerading as permanent things. We are verbs, momentarily stabilized, continuously unfolding. To exist, then, is not to stand upon a finished truth, but to move through a world that is itself unfinished. Existence is transit, it is negotiation, it is traversal across changing terrain. And the central task of being is not the discovery of a final doctrine or a permanent moral ground, but the cultivation of navigation, learning how to move without collapse through a landscape whose contours shift as we move within it. Tonight, I want to outline a system of ontology, a descriptive account of what being is like that takes motion rather than stasis as its starting point. This ontology proposes a simple but far-reaching claim. Existence is sustained motion through a field of limits. Our reality is not primarily shaped by immutable essences or fixed identities. It is shaped by boundaries, by limits of capacity, limits of understanding, limits of time, energy, attention, embodiment, and relationship. Life unfolds as a continuous encounter with these limits, and meaning, in this view, is not imposed from above or guaranteed by alignment with absolutes. Meaning emerges from how we interpret and respond to the informational signals generated at the boundary between our motion and what is possible. We do not move through existence guided by commandments etched into the universe. We move by reading signals. Our primary instrument, therefore, is interpretation. We are, whether we acknowledge it or not, constant interpreters of reality. At every moment, existence is broadcasting information about our position, our velocity, and the constraints shaping our next possible move. But too often, we misread these signals, not because they are unclear, but because we distort them with inherited overlays. Moral judgment, drama, metaphysical anxiety, and the deep desire for reality to be a story about our personal worth or failure. This ontology asks us to perform a disciplined clearing, to listen for the signals themselves, before they are converted into accusation or aspiration. These signals are not commands. They are not verdicts. They are not promises. They are readings from the instrument panel of a system in motion. Let us now examine the core orientational signals that structure this navigation, signals that arise wherever motion meets limit. First, difficulty. Difficulty is perhaps the most commonly misinterpreted signal in human life. We have been trained to see difficulty as a moral test, a measure of character, or a curriculum imposed by fate. In this framework, difficulty is stripped of those narratives. Difficulty is not a judgment. It is a capacity stress indicator. Difficulty simply reports that the current mode of operation is drawing heavily on available resources, physical stamina, emotional resilience, cognitive bandwidth, relational tolerance, or temporal margin. Like the warning light on an engine or the load indicator on a bridge, it provides information about strain. To interpret difficulty properly is not to ask, "What does this say about me?" but to ask, "What does this say about the system right now?" Is this strain strengthening capacity through adaptation, or eroding it through depletion? Is the stress temporary and recoverable, or cumulative and destabilizing? Does motion need to slow? Does the load need redistribution? Does capacity require deliberate expansion through rest, training, or support. To glorify difficulty as inherently virtuous is to flirt with structural failure. To flee all difficulty is to forfeit growth. The signal itself makes no such demands. It merely states, attention, current conditions are approaching a limit. Navigation begins there. Second, clarity. Clarity is often mistaken for arrival. We long for clarity as if it were a permanent state, a final understanding that, once achieved, will stabilize us forever. In this ontology, clarity is something far more modest and far more useful. Temporary legibility within a local horizon. Clarity occurs when intention, information, and capacity briefly align. The signal-to-noise ratio drops. The next step becomes readable. The map and the terrain coincide for a short stretch of path. But clarity is always bounded. It belongs to a particular context, a particular moment, a particular scale. One can have exquisite clarity about what to say next, and no clarity at all about where a relationship is headed. One can feel clear about beginning a project while remaining entirely ignorant of its long-term consequences. The navigational error occurs when local clarity is mistaken for universal truth, when a moment of legibility hardens into doctrine. Clarity then becomes a blinding light, preventing adaptation when conditions change. Use clarity when it appears. Move with it, but do not worship it. It is a clearing, not a continent. Third, ignorance. Ignorance requires the most careful reclamation. In many moral systems, ignorance is treated as shameful, a failure of diligence or intelligence. In this ontology, ignorance is not only neutral, it is structurally necessary. Ignorance marks the boundary of your current horizon. It names what lies beyond your existing maps. Without ignorance, there would be no learning, no discovery, no love, no genuine transformation. Movement between horizons requires not yet knowing. The signal of ignorance does not say, "You are inadequate." It says, "Here your maps end." And that is not a condemnation. It is an invitation to proceed cautiously, indirectly, or not at all, to consult second-hand knowledge, to reuse warnings, to decide whether traversal is worth the cost of revision it will demand. All growth is movement from the known, through ignorance, into provisional understanding. To punish ignorance is to demand omniscience. To deny it is to remain trapped within the smallest possible circle of certainty. Fourth, warning. Warnings are predictive signals. They arise when a system extrapolates its current trajectory and detects a collision with a known boundary of safety, sustainability, dignity, coherence, or care. Warnings are the quiet tightening in the body, the uneasy pattern recognition that says, "This path will extract more than it gives." A warning is not an accusation. It does not imply cowardice or weakness. It is foresight compressed into sensation. To ignore warnings is not courage. It is the refusal of information. To heed them is not retreat. It is intelligent course correction. Warnings exist to be reused. They are the accumulated memory of harm that does not need to be repeated. Like the bright coloration of a poisonous frog, or the signal flags of a storm, they exist so that learning does not require annihilation. Fifth, traversal. Traversal names what cannot be skipped. Insight, no matter how elegant, does not substitute for passage. You can understand grief intellectually and still have to walk through it. You can comprehend skill acquisition and still have to practice. You can know forgiveness is necessary and still have to speak the words, endure the discomfort, and metabolize the change. Traversal belongs to time, friction, and embodiment. It is where theory meets resistance. It is why existence has cost. Maps can prevent unnecessary danger. They cannot eliminate distance. Traversal insists on presence. It is the work that rewires capacity, rather than merely informing intention. To confuse insight for traversal is to mistake orientation for arrival. Sixth, stopping. Stopping is perhaps the most stigmatized signal of all. In cultures that equate worth with momentum, stopping is labeled failure, weakness, or pathology. In this ontology, stopping is often the most coherent response to accumulated signal. Stopping indicates that forward motion has become incoherent, that resources are depleted, signals are contradictory, or continuation would amplify harm. It is not the absence of motion, it is strategic suspension. Stopping allows integration. It permits the dust of experience to settle. It creates the conditions for new clarity to emerge. Winter is not a mistake in the life of a forest. Neither is rest in the life of a system. Signal corruption. What causes us to misread these signals? Three forces corrupt interpretation more reliably than any others: punishment, drama, and moralization. Punishment reframes signal as verdict. Drama amplifies noise until meaning collapses. Moralization turns navigation into warfare against reality. These overlays replace information with identity threat. They compel reaction rather than interpretation. Receiver disciplines. What preserves signal integrity? Not beliefs, but postures. Trust. Trust that reality provides feedback, even when it offers no guarantees. Optimism. The operational assumption that a coherent next step exists. Compassion. The refusal to compound error with self-annihilation. Openness to feedback. The willingness to revise maps without erasing selfhood. These are not virtues. They are maintenance protocols for a learning system. No salvation promised. This ontology offers no utopia. It does not deny catastrophe. It does not promise reversibility. It does not guarantee coherence. Some collapses cannot be repaired. Some paths permanently alter the terrain. To acknowledge this is not nihilism. It is respect for reality. Closing. What I am offering, then, is not an ideology, a therapy, or a strategy for winning at life. It is a navigation discipline for being. You are already in motion. Limits are already shaping your path. Signals are already broadcasting. Your task is not to command existence, but to read it. Not to judge, but to interpret. Not to rush, but to traverse with care. Navigate. Do not dominate. Interpret. Do not moralize. Move with compassion for the finite, signal-rich system that you are. Thank you